genocide.
I feel very, very bad because they did an inhuman thing to Armenians, and any Armenian cannot forget it. Never, never.
The gendarmes came with their rifles, knocking at our doors. Get out over there. We're going to transfer you to another city. So whatever we could take along in a quick way, we got into the group, and that night we arrived in Malatya. There, they separated the men and the boys over 10 years old, and one group took them to the other side of the city. Women and children in another group, just the opposite end of Malatya. That evening, we heard shots fired. We saw the flashes of gunfire. And soon, one of the boys who had escaped came to our group and said, forget about the men, because they were all killed at that massacre. So we got to the shores of the Euphrates River. There, what they did was, the gendarmes came and picked up all the boys between 5 and 10 years old, threw us into a pile. And I happened to be one of the first ones, and I was at the bottom of the pile. After they had all the boys in this pile, they started with their swords and bayonets killing us boys. And one of the bayonets just hit me in my right cheek here, and the blood was streaming, not only the blood from my cheek, but the blood from those dead boys, that hot blood coming all over me, and I couldn't scream or I couldn't cry for fear that they would finish the job and kill me again.
The paper boy who sold papers right in the middle of our square was a clubfoot boy who spoke in Turkish only. He would come and shout, "Ajans, ajans çok dahşatli malhaba vedislar," meaning news, news, wonderful war news. And then he would go on saying how many they had killed, how many of the enemies they had killed. And the enemy happened to be men and young boys they had taken out to dig trenches for their soldiers. And they would just spear them and throw them in the trenches. And those were the numbers that they would say how the enemy had been busted. And we found out that those men and boys were being speared and thrown into the trenches was when the young boys, 14, 15 years old, who hadn't been killed, they would dig themselves out of the trenches and come to the town holding their guts hanging out of their bellies because the spears had made holes there and the guts would be hanging out. They had annihilated all those men and boys who had been forced to dig trenches for the soldiers. But it was never trenches for the soldiers, it was their own graves.
They'd taken these Armenians from Deir ez-Zor into the desert, and there was hundreds and thousands of them, like a cattle, when from out west they would bring their cattle to sell them out into the markets. It was an awful sight. Some couldn't even walk. Some couldn't even. They were dragged by their friends, and so far as we know, when they got to the desert, God knows what happened to them. But we had gone to the desert later on, and we saw how they were mistreated, how they were beaten up, and how they were starving them. People are getting burnt in ditches. We saw that. I know that for sure. They looked like skeletons. with mothers and children dying together. And it's sad for me. I can't talk anymore about it because it's really bad, sickening how these people were treated. It's very, very sad.
I saw with my own eyes a poor neighbor of ours from Bandırma. She couldn't walk anymore, and they took hold of her and threw her into the burning fire. And my father's first cousin, Hagopyan, lost his mind in front of us. Then we were supposed to be the fortunate ones. Then we went, they put us on train again towards the Syrian desert. My baby sister died on the train there. She was only 4 years old. And my parents just buried her by the railroad tracks there. From there on, we had to walk again. There were bodies all around us on the sides, and then I saw with my eyes a pregnant woman among us. And because she was lagging, the Turkish soldiers put the sword on her stomach, and the baby came out of her. And the mother died there too, right there.
Here is a photograph where you see Armenian priests to make the grave for the dead. And I remember that one of these priests said to me, "Once I was a priest, and now I am a lamb who is gone to be killed." I came in Turkey as a member of the German Red Cross, and in this quality I came through the whole desert of Mesopotamia and was a witness of the terrible persecution of the poor Armenian people and saw the terrible sacrifice. A witness is a very difficult task. I could never more forget what I have seen. I was always willing to speak of this terrible thing and to say to the peoples, don't care that not a second time the same terrible thing can repeat.
I buried that little child, and the next day, she was the very first ones of the dead. The next day you find out that she was picked up by the jackals and gone away, just the bones left. These things dig into you, not only once, but throughout life. Throughout life. Through these days. I am 98 years old, and today, to this day, I cannot forget any of this. I forget what I saw yesterday, maybe, but I could not forget these things. And yet, we have to beg nations to recognize genocide. I lost 11 members of my family, and I have to beg people to believe me. That's what hurts you most. It's a terrible world, terrible experience.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to recognize Samuel Nazarian to introduce his guest. Some of our guests might not be here because they have gone to the Senate side to witness the recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe we have Ms. Toni Hagopian in the back of the chambers, and if she is, I'd like her to come up. And while she is, I'll take a moment to give some background. Toni is accompanied first and foremost by her family and journalist filmmaker Carla Garabedian, who helped with putting together the film that we just saw. Toni Hagopian is the wife of genocide survivor, educator, and filmmaker, the late and great Dr. Michael J. Hagopian. She and Michael recorded hundreds of these video interviews of Armenian genocide survivors, which she had a profound personal effect on her. The video testimonies we watched here today were those recorded by the Hagopians and archived by the Armenian Film Foundation, founded by Michael in 1979. In April 2010, the Hagopians and the Armenian Film Foundation partnered with the USC Shoah Foundation to preserve, catalog, and index his collection of nearly 400 testimonies of Armenian genocide survivors and witnesses in its visual history archive. In the next decades, her only hope is that the public can watch the testimonies and make use of them, whether through education or filmmaking. Thank you for being here, Ms. Hagopian.
Thank you. If I may bring your attention back to the podium, please, Mr. Welk. On your behalf, I would like to recognize your wife, Ms. Vanessa Sefoyan Welk. Mr. Rigado, you're recognized from your desk to introduce your guest, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe they are currently in the Senate right now, but I just want this House to welcome the clergy from the Western Diocese of the Armenian Church from around the state who've joined both houses today in our commemorations. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to Mr. Nazarian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd also like to introduce one last individual, Ms. Nora Hovsepian, practicing attorney with her officers in the San Fernando Valley. She is the chair and has been the chair for the last 3.5 years of the Western Region Armenian National Committee. She's the granddaughter of 4 genocide survivors. In 1973, Nora's paternal grandmother sat her down at the age of 10. This is what most survivors' kids and grandkids went through, and tearfully told her of a story of her survival. She had never spoken of it before and had never even told her only child, Nora's father, who learned his mother's heartbreaking story from his daughter. Thank you for being here, Nora.
Thank you. And I have my sister and her family, the Kirkarians, Mike, Ani, and Shushan, up in the gallery. And down in the chamber, my daughter Nairi, my wife Roxy, sister Margot, and son Haraj. Mr. Dubabne, you recognize at your desk.
I'd just like to acknowledge some of the guests that traveled from my district up to Sacramento today to be part of this really special event. I'd first like to welcome Artur Armenian, his beautiful wife Jennifer Balian Armenian, also Mike Medizian, Nishan Kalukian, Ocean Hartunian, and Pierre Yaconian for coming up today. Thank you so much.
As we conclude our ceremony, I have a few announcements. On your desk are 2 books, My Mother's Voice by Dr. K. Muradyan, who's in the audience. Dr. Muradyan, would you stand up and be recognized, please? And the Armenian Genocide, The World Speaks Out, a book by Documents and Declaration by Harut Sasunian. I'd like to encourage our visitors, guests, and members to view a special exhibit in the second floor rotunda of the Capitol today, and another at the California State Museum called The Armenian Journey from Shattered Past to Prosperity, which continues until August 2nd. There will be a reception on the west steps of the Capitol this afternoon at 2 p.m. We will now observe a moment of silence in remembrance of 1.5 million people who lost their lives during the Armenian Genocide of 1915. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. This concludes our ceremony. We will take a brief recess to allow our guests to depart from the chamber. Members, do not leave the chamber. We have other business on file. Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity.
Members, we are back in session. Mr. Holden. Mr. Holden, you are recognized for your additional procedural motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 96, I request unanimous consent to re-refer Assembly Bill 445, Alejo, from the Transportation Committee to Rules Committee.
Without objection, the request is granted.
At the request of the author, please remove file item 97, ACR 1, Levine, from the consent calendar.
Without objection, the request is granted. Members, moving to guest introductions, we have some additional guests with us in the Assembly today. Mr. Rendon, you are recognized for your guest introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the pleasure of introducing Pedro Chan, who is a longtime friend, an acupuncturist, a magician, a restaurateur from the San Gabriel Valley. Dr. Chan joins us at the Capitol today as the presenter of an exhibit honoring the Flying Tigers, the legendary group of American fighter pilots who comprised a volunteer group of the Chinese Air Force during World War II. I invite members to join us for a reception and display of Flying Tigers artifacts upon the conclusion of session in room 317. Thank you.
When we're done.
Members, moving to business on the daily file. Business on the daily file, second reading. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1146, 989, 1197, 422 with amendments, 951 with amendments, 952 with amendments, 747, 560 with amendments, 58 with amendments, 302 with amendments, 740 with amendments, 787 with amendments, 916 with amendments, 1058 with amendments, 1126 with amendments, 1226 with amendments, 891 with amendments, 677 with amendments, 692 with amendments, 901 with amendments, 66 with amendments, 999 with amendments, 1236 with amendments, 985 with amendments, 1004 with amendments, 59 with amendments, 1045 with amendments, 237 with amendments, 921 with amendments, and 1515 with amendments.
All bills will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Concurrence in Senate amendments. File item number 31, ACR 2. Clerk will read.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 2 by Assemblymember Nazarian and others relative to Persian New Year.
Mr. Nazarian, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. ACR 2, which commemorates and observes March 21 as the beginning of Nowruz, is back for concurrence in Senate amendments. Senate amendments add a co-author. With that, I thank you and respectfully ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nazarian. With that, and without objection, we may take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Senate amendments are concurred in. Moving to Assembly third reading. File item 32, passed and retained. Moving to file item number 33, that's ACR 29. Clerk will read.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 29 by Assemblymember Frazier relative to organ donation.
Mr. Frazier, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. ACR 29 recognizes April as the DMV Donate Life California Month, which stresses the need for life-saving transplants and encourages all Californians to sign up with the Donate Life California Organ and Tissue Donor Registry. Currently, more than 123,000 people are on the national organ transplant waiting list, with more than 22,000 of those candidates residing in California. To meet this ongoing need, Californians have had the power since 2005 to ensure their wish to be a donor and is honored by enrolling with the Donate Life California Registry. The registry is the private, nonprofit, state-authorized organ, eye, and tissue donor registry dedicated to saving the lives of thousands of Californians awaiting life-saving transplants and administered by California's four nonprofit, federally designated organ procurement organizations. Donate Life California's partnership with the DMV is crucial to saving lives in California. 95% of all donor registrations in California have occurred as a direct result of the Donate Life California DMV registry collaboration. There is still much work to be done. However, given that of the 31 million licensed drivers and ID holders in California, only 36% have signed up to be an organ, eye, and tissue donors. I myself have a pink dot on my license plate and encourage all of our colleagues to do the same. I ask that the roll be open for co-authors and respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Seeing no additional discussion or debate, the first roll will be open for co-authors. The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. This is to add as co-authors on ACR 29. All members wishing to add as co-authors. The clerk will close the roll. There are 71 co-authors added on ACR 29. Without objection, we may take a voice vote on the resolution. All those in favor say aye. Aye opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. And Mr. Frazier, back to you for your guest introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members again. Please join me in welcoming and recognizing the Donate Life California Board of Directors. Joining us today are Jean Shimoto, Director of the DMV. Sharon Ross is the Director of Public Relations and Community Outreach for Life Sharing. Cindy Silgestrom, Chief Executive Officer of Donor Network West. Prasad Gramella, Chief Operating Officer and Chief Information Officer of One Legacy. Lisa Stocks, immediate and past President, Executive Director, Life Sharing. Thomas Mohn, Chief Executive Officer of One Legacy. And Charlene Zettel, a former Assembly member and Chief Executive Officer of Donate Life California. I want to thank all of you for your work leading the Donate Life California Organ and Tissue Donor Registry and encourage all Californians to join your efforts. Thank you so much.
Members, we are back on the file. File item 34, AB 418, for the purpose of amendments. Clerk will read with amendments.
Assembly Bill 418 with amendments by Assemblymember David Chu.
Mr. David Chu, you may open on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, these amendments are technical and clarifying in nature. Ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no discussion or debate, we may take a voice vote on the amendments. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Bill is out to print and back on file. File item 35, ACR 46. The clerk will read.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 46 by Assemblymember Calderon and others relative to the Arts Council.
Mr. Calderon, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today I'm presenting ACR 46, joint authored with Assemblymember Adrena Zarian, which will urge a substantial increased appropriation to the California Arts Council, which aside from last year had not seen an increase in their budget for quite some time. Supporting the arts is not only the right thing to do, it's an investment that is guaranteed to pay the state back. The arts have been proven to contribute to the economy of money and ideas. The 2013 Otis report on the creative economy found that 1 in 10 jobs in California are part of the creative industries. In fact, the creative industries of California generated $273.5 billion in revenue and employed 1.4 million workers across the state in 2013 alone. Unfortunately, the state's recent financial crisis resulted in dramatic cuts to the visual and performing arts education programs for students across California. Even more upsetting, between 1999 and 2004, student enrollment in music education declined by almost half. ACR 46 will increase funding for fine arts courses, which studies have shown improve student attendance, performance, and dropout rates. I urge your aye vote to help keep the conversation going and to give the California Arts Council the financial support it deserves. I would like to ask that the first roll be open to co-authors.
Thank you, Mr. Calderon. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, Mr. Calderon is asking the first roll be open for co-authors. The clerk will open the roll. All members wishing to add as co-authors on ACR 46. The clerk will close the roll. There are 71 co-authors added on ACR 46. Without objection, we may take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted.